The Last Tinker, City of Colors, is a colorful 3D platformer that finds you as a monkey-like creature trying to restore color to his world. Given the relative paucity of 3D platformers such as this is a game that I was really excited to play. Super Mario 3D World was one of my favorite games of last year, so suffice it to say, I'm a fan of this type of game. In many ways, The Last Tinker feels like a throwback to the types of fun, colorful platformers that were so prevalent in the Nintendo 64 era. Sadly, nothing ever quite gels, and there isn't a single element here that is even close to being on the level of something like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. The game makes just about the worst first impression you could imagine. The opening hour or so consists of an exceptionally slow-paced tutorial, and it is disastrously bad. It's pretty much a case study on how not to begin your game. It's ridiculously slow-paced and frustratingly hand-holdy. No game, I don't need a 5-minute stretch of this tutorial to teach me how to use a fighting system that essentially amounts to me mashing the punch button until I win. It certainly gets better from there, but it's actually kind of shocking how misguided and boring the first hour or so of this game is. The most bizarre design choice here is the lack of a jump button. Instead, if you want to jump to another platform, you simply hold down the run button and sprint in the direction of where you want to jump, and the game does the jumping for you. It's odd. This isn't the first game to use this particular control scheme, but it feels particularly off-putting in a platformer like this. It does essentially work, but it robs this type of game of a lot of its appeal. But hey, if you've ever thought platformers would be better if it weren't for all that pesky platforming, then this might just be the game for you. The controls are otherwise fairly solid, though with a few minor problems. For example, I really wish there were an always run setting. You have to hold down the right trigger button to run, and since there's rarely any reason to not be running, you're pretty much holding it down the entire time you play. Holding this button down for extended periods can get pretty uncomfortable with the Xbox 360 gamepad, and so I eventually resorted to wrapping a rubber band around the controller to hold the button down for me. Though the combat does start out as mindless button mashing, it gets progressively better as you go along and start to unlock more abilities and face tougher opponents. It's nothing too complex, but it actually starts to get pretty fun. Sadly, this is when you're more than halfway through the game and have already suffered through 2 or 3 hours of tediously simplistic combat. Every now and then there's a boss battle, but none are particularly challenging. They just feel like something you have to get through. A couple of them, the final boss battle in particular, are so drawn out and tedious that they feel like work. You feel like you should get a paycheck at the end. The colorful graphics, though a bit garish and haphazard at times, are passable, with the notable exception of a level where everything gets frustratingly, uncomfortably blurry. This, at the very least, made me appreciate the rest of the game's graphics for not hurting my eyeballs. I know it sounds like I hated this game, but I actually didn't. It's perfectly playable and actually kind of fun in stretches. I have quite a few small to medium-sized complaints and nitpicks, but nothing earth-shaking. It's okay. It's problematic enough that I wouldn't recommend buying it for $20 to anybody, but if it pops up for cheap during a Steam sale, and you're hard up for platformers like this, you could do worse, I guess.